first thing that you should write, and probably have in all caps and bolded, use your pictures. We're not trying to like invent what lions look like. We're using the pictures to get this, yeah. And what I'm basically doing with the newspaper mold is to create the shape of the animal's skull out of newspaper. And then I'll be laying the clay over that, and then I'll build up off of that, okay? So it's giving us a structure underneath to build off of. So I do need masking tape. Please don't waste masking tape, so you won't need very much, and you'll see that as I go. So to start this off, I'm going to kind of have a ball of newspaper that I'll then build up into the shape. The lion's face, if you look, is somewhat circular. This jaw part down here is going to be built off forward from the mask. So if you look at the side view, if I start with this basic ball, this is going to be actually something separate that I'm going to add on. So I'm going to start with just the back part of the head, which is going to be pretty circular. If I were doing an animal like a, did anybody do, yeah, like a parrot or a horse or a zebra or a rhinoceros or an animal with more of a long head, I would do it a little differently. I would make it more of an oval. To do this with the newspaper, I'm going to take the corners and crumple them in toward the center. Okay, so write that down. And I just started with one sheet. That's a good note to write down. Use single sheets of paper. If I take like a stack and try to crumple up thick layers of newspaper, when I crumple it, the edges will make little corners that like point and stick out, which you don't want. So you do single sheets because they crumple much easier. Then I'll take that first one. See, I've not used tape yet. Put this inside another piece, and then do the same thing, crumpling that in toward the middle. Okay. For my lion, my size, what's the requirement for size? 14 inches. It will probably go from the end of his chin to the back where his ears are. That will be the 14 inches. So it won't be top to bottom necessarily. It's going to be a diagonal. This newspaper is starting to get a little too small for this, so I'm going to tape this just to hold it in place. And I'm just going to use a couple sheets or a couple pieces of newspaper. Not going to pull it, as tight as possible. It's just going to be to hold it in place temporarily. Perfect.
Liam doesn't have a lot. So.
Doesn't he? Okay. Oh, and that's an extra credit thing. Do any of you guys have newspaper at home your parents recycle? Bring that in. It's extra credit. I just don't like the little small ads in the slick paper, but this regular newspaper is the best. Now I'm going to do a separate piece that will be this part, right? The like jaw, nose section is going to be separate. Mold is probably going to be several parts put together, and depending on the animal. So each animal, this is going to be slightly different. So I'm going to do a top jaw, or like the nose and jaw section, separate from the bottom, okay? So I'm going to start and just do the top one. Crumple this in toward the center just like I did before. And now I'm going to think about the shape as not being round, but it's going to be, it's slightly round, but it's a little more oblong, okay? And this is just the top of the jaw. One thing you want to notice on your pictures is what is like the angle. Notice from his forehead into his nose that it's really like a slope. It's just a continuous slope. It's not like his forehead comes down and his nose sticks out. That's something you have to notice. And I'm going to make sure when I attach this on that I'm going from the forehead into the nose pretty. Okay, so I've got my newspaper built up, and it's a little bit more of an oval like that. And I'm just trying to picture the bridge of the nose and like their top part of their jaw. And most animals, I would do it this way. I would have the top and the bottom be separate. And if you're not sure on yours, then I can help you with it. Okay, so right where this is going to tape on, I'm kind of taking and pinching this Newspaper is really an amazing material, honestly. It's very workable. It's great for this kind of thing. So I'm going to take and kind of flatten that. See how I kind of pinched it? So now it's got like this little angle that now when I tape it, it will keep this nice slope. I'm just going to take a few pieces and make sure the pieces are long enough that they're not going to come untaped. But, you know, like I said, we don't need to be tape crazy and use a whole roll. Look at the profile here. Notice the end of his nose, so it slopes out, and then from the end of his nose, it kind of slopes back. So the nose sticks out the farthest on his face. Okay, so that shape. The big thing here is going to be, you want to get the proportions correct so that it actually looks like the animal you're trying to make. If you don't get the proportions right, or the angles right, or the position right of these parts, then it's not going to look like that. This will be that same kind of ovalish, a little bit flatter shape. And then where it connects, same thing, I'm going to kind of pinch this so that there's going to be a slope from the bottom right into, and then I'll tape this in place, and then I'll tape them together. Now, if you were going to do an animal with an open mouth, which you could, then you actually could keep the bottom and the top jaw separated.
How are you going to get the mold out?
Okay, so remember it's a mask. He asked how you're going to get the mold out. Remember it's a mask, so it's only the front. So you're only going to lay clay over the front, and then you'll just be able to pull the newspaper out the back. I will not do the ears out of newspaper, because I'll just make them out of clay. Think about what's part of the skull. Okay, so the ears aren't part of the skull. The ears would be flesh. They would be on after. Okay, so just